Solitary confinement requires that an inmate be restricted to one cell and has no contact, or at least very little contact, with other inmates. Kinds of solitary confinement differ all over the world, and no doubt in some countries you still have what might be better called dungeons. In most developed countries these days, such segregation units are not as barbaric, and prisoners should have some time outside of the cell, as well as receive enough nourishment that they won't be looking forward to the next time an insect gets into their cell. Nonetheless, many critics call it an inhumane psychological torture that is hardly in line with rehabilitation. Let's now see how you might deal with it in this episode of the Infographics Show: how to get through time in solitary confinement. First of all, the amount of time you spend in what some people call the box is important when we're discussing how you might get through it. Spending one day in there can't be compared to spending 1 year in there. Some inmates find themselves doing a temporary stay in solitary for what authorities call their own good. Maybe guards believed they were a danger to themselves and had to be under constant supervision, or other inmates might have hurt someone else and needed to be immediately separated from other people. Then there are the high-profile prisoners, perhaps prisoners who have great power still even on the inside, and often they can spend a long time in solitary. We might look at Mexican drug kingpins such as Felix Gallardo, aka the Godfather, or Joaquin Archibaldo El Chapo Guzman Lorea, who have complained about being in their cells all day, every day. Look at former Aryan Brotherhood leader and prison guard killer Thomas Edward Silverstein, who's been in solitary in the US since 1983. In the UK, you have Robert Maudsley, aka Hannibal the Cannibal, who's been in solitary almost 40 years. He'd killed 3 prisoners while locked up, and the stories were gruesome. The media writes he spends 23 hours a day in the cage, a cell made of bulletproof glass which was built specifically for him in 1983, after he was officially classed Britain's most dangerous prisoner. But as you probably know, it's not always inmate or guard killers that end up in solitary, and some less dangerous people have spent a long time locked in those cells. We might look at the story of Albert Woodfox, sometimes called the man who spent the most years in solitary in American prison history. The former Black Panther, part of what became known as the Angola Three, was arrested in 1971 for armed robbery. Prior to that, he had been fighting racism in Angola, Louisiana, and ended up in prison there. We should add that he certainly was no angel, having been involved in other robberies. In 1972, he was accused of killing a prison guard along with 2 others, and he would end up spending the next 43 years in solitary. Amnesty International writes state authorities kept Albert in a cell measuring 6 by 9 feet or 2 by 3 meters for 23 hours a day. He was allowed 1 hour of exercise a day in a yard, but this was on his own, and he remained shackled. Even though the murder conviction was overturned 3 times, he remained in solitary. We won't get into it, but the evidence against him was weak. Very weak. Each time the conviction was overturned and authorities retried him, and then in 2015, Louisiana state authorities were barred from retrying him ever again. And in the end, all 3 men had their convictions overturned, but Woodfox was the last to leave prison. While this story is about how to deal with solitary, we tell you this to emphasize that the practice can be overused, and it can be used to abuse prisoners. Now let's look at how a man stayed in this box 43 years of his life. None of us can likely be put into this context in our own lives. Just imagine if you're alone now, not being able to leave that room for a few days. 43 years in a tiny cell, perhaps as an innocent man. How could someone get through that? On top of that, Woodfox told the media that he was taken into the worst cell in solitary, a place called the Dungeon. He also said his guards would regularly beat him there. Fortunately, he was allowed to read books in there. This, the BBC tells us, was one thing that kept him sane. He taught himself criminal and civil law, and the BBC writes that he would teach other inmates when he had his hour out each day. While Amnesty said he spent his hour alone, we're guessing he could communicate with others through a fence, which is often the case for segregated prisoners. He explained the best moment of being locked up was teaching another man to read. All of the things we went through and all of the pain, the suffering, the struggles, the victories here and there, none of that compared to the feeling I got when a man who could not read or write at all could sit across from me and read a book. The New Yorker tells us that he tried to control his surroundings as much as was possible. He kept the light on all the time and covered it when he slept his 3 hours. He ate little and slept little, and this adapting to a strict regime that gave him some feeling of autonomy. We wanted the security people to think that they were dealing with superhumans, he told the New Yorker. Before I let them take something from me, I deny it from myself. He wrote many letters to family, pen pals, to the Black Panthers, to people fighting racism and inequality on the outside. He was described by social workers as respectful, positive, cooperative, and neat. Yet every time he came up against a disciplinary panel, he was denied re-entry into the main population. Then you have Charles Bronson, often called Britain's most notorious prisoner. He was only charged at first with armed robbery, but due to his erratic, often violent behavior, as well as taking hostages inside, he's been in prison since 1988. Prior to that, he'd been locked up for over a decade. Much of this time had been spent in solitary confinement. As you may have seen in the movie about him, he didn't exactly get through this time in solitary with ease. He wrote once, "Years of solitary have left me unable to face the light for more than a few minutes. It gives me terrible headaches if I do. Years of loneliness in small cells have left me paranoid about people invading my space. I now can't stand people getting too close and crowding me." But he did write a book on keeping fit in solitary confinement. He was once a bare-knuckle fighter and so enjoyed keeping fit. The book released in 2002 and was called Solitary Fitness. He claimed to do at least 2,000 push-ups a day and that his confinement was spent mostly on building his body. We read many reviews on his book and it seems he was onto something, with his exercises requiring zero equipment, working for most people. In short, if you're in solitary, work out and try to improve by the week to give yourself goals. We found another man who spent a lot of time in solitary, and for him, using his imagination was key to survival. He imagined all the interactions he had with people throughout his life and imagined alternate realities where he did something different, so in a way creating a fiction around all of his memories. "I used to lie in bed with my eyes closed," he said, "thinking about my past, thinking about my future, planning for the future. Some of it was based on reality and the other borderline fantasy." Another inmate from Texas called Michael Jewell said he did the same. He would imagine situations and how he might react. He said it made him a better person because he was continually noticing problems in his past behavior and he knew the best way to react for a positive outcome. "When I opened my eyes and stood, I would feel refreshed and even invigorated," he said. Psychologists tell us that when a person is robbed of sensory stimulation of the things around them, their brains get active and the imagination is more fecund. This, however, can be negative for people who have mental problems. For a long time, it's been stated that many people who end up in solitary have such problems, and they only worsen when trapped in a small cell. A psychologist told the BBC that some people do go insane inside these cells. They have isolation panic and their identity becomes fragmented. That's an extreme case of somebody's identity becoming so badly damaged and essentially destroyed that it's impossible for them to reconstruct it, he said. In another article, one person said that you really must take control over your own space. That means keeping everything spotless as well as keeping yourself very clean. Own your area and take care of yourself. This even means doing your nails daily, just by making them the same size or finding a way to make them smoother. You need routine and you must stick to it. We also looked at the website Prison Writers and a piece on how to deal with a long-term solitary confinement. The writer, who had spent many years in solitary and was currently imprisoned, said stress management was key. He said don't be idle and added that watching TV, if you have one, or even masturbating all the time is not a good idea. You must be productive and if possible learn a new hobby. Try artwork, crocheting, writing, chess, etc. Your brain is a muscle and if you don't use it, you lose it, he said. He also said if you want to transcend your cell's walls, you must read and read a lot. Invite some of the greatest minds in history into your cell, he said. Like others we've talked about today, he said study the law because you might well be treated better when you know it. Examine your life, he said, and stay healthy. That meant staying off the prison commissary processed foods as much as possible. On a final note, we found a researcher who had spent years visiting people in solitary confinement and trying to understand how they got through it. His conclusion is that successful inmates followed a rule of what he called the 7 R's. Despite maybe some of this sounding obvious, he said most prisoners in solitary don't follow these rules, and their time as solitary prisoners could result in withdrawal, destructive rumination, cognitive impairment, depression, self-harm, and exceptionally suicide. The 7 R's he talked about are rescheduling. This means learning how to manage time. Don't look at the 20 years you have to serve. Take it day by day and have plans for those days. Removal. This is what we've discussed, meaning remove yourself from the present moment of being surrounded by 4 walls. It could be reading, writing, exercise, or any of the things we've talked about. It might even be forming relationships with an aunt that comes into the cell. Reduction. By this, he means reducing the time through drug use. While he said it might not be the best path, when things get hard, some prisoners do find time passes with the prescribed medicines they're offered. Reorientation. This means living in the present, and we mean totally, like someone who is meditating. If you can be at one with everything, focus on your breath, the sounds around you, forget the past and the future. Resistance. This is finding ways to beat the system. It might be against prison rules, but some people find it helps if they can tap on some pipes to communicate. But there are many ways prisoners can get one over on the system. Others, as we have said, study law and challenge their sentence or matters regarding their confinement. Raptness. This is becoming completely absorbed in something such as writing or hobbies. It's more than just removal because one becomes lost in their art. Reinterpretation. This is like putting your situation against another, perhaps comparing yourself to someone who had it worse and got through it. Those who can devise or adopt a frame of reference, often political or religious, that puts their pain in context, seem to draw succor from their circumstances, said the researcher. For the fortunate few who can reimagine their situation, the potential rewards are substantial. If you've been in this situation, we'd love to know how you got through it. If you haven't, how do you think you would get through it? Or what do you think would be the best way? Tell us in the comments. Also, be sure to check out our other video, Man Spent 43 Years in Isolation. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.